Welcome, Reanimated fans. I am H.A. Conrad, coming to you as always with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Coming at you from rainy Northern California.
Woo! Well, that's different.
It is certainly a change of pace. Of course, we've gone from drought to flood warnings. So
there you go.
Yeah, we're gonna get like 9 inches of rain tomorrow.
Fun.
In one day. which is a lot.
And it's also a lot for land that is not used to getting rain. So hey, mudslides, right?
And land that burned last year. So yeah,
pretty toasty land. But hey, do not look a gift rain in the mouth.
Definitely not. Although I might stand outside with my mouth open and just let it, rain all over me. It's honestly, it's hard not to go outside and just dance.
And here it is, just gray. So nothing to report on that front. Other than rain, a little gray sprinkle here and there.
It's been a while since we did the reanimated weather checkup. So
I was just thinking, I know how much people love it when we talk about the weather, but it's definitely full on fall here. I did my daily walk through the cemetery yesterday and it was pretty awesome.
Your foliage looking good out there.
My cemetery foliage. Interestingly though, we've been getting a lot of like really cool sunsets, but they look they are definitely there's been some fires down south, so I have to assume that some of the sunsets is due to some of the pollution from that, because they do not look normal. That's the best way I can kind of put it. They look like smoggy, weird sunsets, but pretty cool regardless. I'll enjoy the post-apocalyptic weird sunsets here.
They're okay. You got to check your AQI, your air quality, and make sure it's not too bad outside. Of course, in New York, I imagine it's never super great.
Sometimes it's actually better than the West Coast often, but still we got a little bit of it. But anyway, all that aside, cemetery walks aside, things are going okay. Generally, all good here. Though in reanimated news, there have not been a lot of news items. So today we're gonna probably we don't really have anything to share on that front, but we are going to be chatting quite a bit about Midnight Mass, which is the Netflix series that more of a vampire series. So we're talking about the first couple episodes, and kind of suitable given the Halloween season. So I'm all game for that. And given your reign, it has some, parallels.
Yeah.
So hopefully not too many parallels, but pretty much like an amazing cast. And this is a series directed by Mike Flanagan. So Haunting at Hill House, Hush, a few other kind of horror genre-y things.
He also has the creator credit, which I don't know if that means that he wrote it all. I haven't been looking at the credits to see if they have different writers for each episode. Have you noticed?
No, I have not yet. So, but I definitely, and I think a couple people mentioned that this has some tangential connection with a couple of his prior creations. So I have to look more into that. And I admit I didn't delve too far into it, but I will say just at the outset, before getting into our review, and I have thought this before actually with some of his other things. Oh, he also did Dr. Sleep, which was the sort of sequel to The Shining. He definitely has a huge homage to Stephen King, and I felt it so much in these first 2 episodes. I don't know what you thought about it, but that was I was like, wow, this feels like this is like pulling a lot of Stephen King references into it, or sort of like that vibe. I don't know.
I mean, I guess I could see it's not a huge leap to get there for sure. But I hadn't made that connection, so it wasn't rattling around in my head. I'm honestly just kind of like, I don't know that I've seen Stephen King deal this much with Catholicism, I guess. So it does feel like a different sort of animal to me too.
He hasn't gone into it to the I would say more what I was feeling is a lot of the character, the portraits of the different characters in this, the feel of the town, definitely had a like very like Dolores Claiborne-esque feel, like that small town thing. Like it definitely had a lot of like Castle Rock feel to me, like
this
that
town. It's such a character, and every time they do and I don't know where the set is or where they found this place, if it's a real place, but it has so much character.
Yeah, and like just the idea that you've got this group of people this very small community, and there's like secrets upon secrets, but everybody kind of knows different things, but there's still things that are hidden even in this tiny community. There's a lot of like, especially the characters are really well done, and this cast is excellent. I admit I am a huge fan of Hamish Linklater. He has graced the stage of Shakespeare in the Park, and he is really famous for that. And he's incredible at it. But I also love him as an actor in general, and I'm enjoying his performance here tremendously. He plays Father Paul in this, which is the one of the main characters.
Yeah, dude, the second episode,
If not the main character.
yeah, well, he kind of ties it all together for sure. I mean, it's probably supposed to be Riley, but yeah, the Father Paul, I'll put that in quotes because I don't know if that's really who that person is. But Father Paul is definitely a major central focus for these two episodes, and that homily that he gives in episode 2 kind of have me feeling some feels as an atheist. I don't know if your religious convictions are being like challenged or tested by watching any of this, but it's been really interesting for me as someone who's never been a Catholic. I was raised in the Anglican church or Presbyterian, and but I have been an atheist in my heart since I was probably 11. And only gotten stronger in those convictions as I've gotten older. But having those beliefs, watching this, and Riley's journey has been really interesting to kind of be along for.
Well, I don't know that I've ever made a secret about it, but I am definitely a recovering Catholic. And this is a tradition that I was definitely steeped in, and maybe a little bit more so just because, the family is my grandparents are Irish Catholic, and I understand people's need for belief, and I certainly do not judge anybody else's. I wouldn't say I would say I'm probably more of an agnostic versus an atheist, but really don't subscribe to organized religion. I feel like anytime there's humans involved in these kinds of things, there's an ulterior motive. And I was feeling the feels in this, but I also have a little bit of, I'll admit to you, a little bit of PTSD watching some of the church scenes, and specifically the one you mentioned.
Is that normal? I've only been to like 1-2 Catholic masses, and I don't remember them. But is it normal for the priest to yell at the congregation that much?
It depends on the priest. Everybody has their different style. I would say the more sort of general, that is very much not, I would say probably not really a Catholic tradition. I have seen a few more untraditional priests, but not as many as I've seen people that are just kind of going through the motions, quite frankly, and they'll like read a homily. They don't necessarily they're not necessarily adding in their own interpretations into the way that that this particular priest is. So it is out of character for that kind of a mass. Most of the time, like every once in a while, you'll see, some kind of connection. And one of the things, I take a lot of issue with, and always have, is that, there is, to me, especially with organized religion, there's a lot of treating people as other, and a lot of guilt. And that's the Irish Catholic guilt thing kicking into. And to me, it's very manipulative. And I definitely felt that way here. And the conversation between Father Paul and Riley, I thought was just at this point one of my favorite moments in the show, and like really incredible acting there.
It's an intense scene.
It was intense, but I really enjoyed it. But yeah, like I will say I didn't anticipate that some of these scenes triggering me in the way that it did. And then they also have these characters that are really illustrating sort of specific thought processes and specific, I don't want to say stereotypes, but I guess that's kind of it. But Bev Keane is a very good example of this, of somebody who is supposedly quite devout, but there's something really rotten there,
Oh yeah. That the show, it's interesting actually how much the show shows its hand with
Yep.
characters. like like from the first episode, we know there's something in that big box that Father Hill moves into the house, right?
Yeah.
We know that Bev Keane poisoned the dog. I feel
Yep.
like her dress is in the shot where she drops the poisoned hot. We assume it's the poisoned hot dog vehicle of
Yep.
that kills Pike the dog. It doesn't like hide a lot, and to me, that I don't know that that is a Stephen King method. I feel like he is not quite that brazen with his plot points. Maybe. Yeah.
It's not that was sort of hitting the notes there for me. It's more of the sort of characterization of the hypocrisy of things that are supposed to be or feel as if they are, like, for example, the idyllic idea that people have about small town life, and not thinking about the struggle that that might be. And case in point, this whole town, it's like you see you have these beautiful shots of like the sunsets and sunrises and and it is this community, but then you have like the darker side of the fact that this is a community struggling because of an oil spill, and the town is kind of dying out, and there's still tragedy even beyond that, like with alcoholism and in part maybe connected with that, but with alcoholism, but also, like there was a quote unquote hunting accident with Lisa. And so there's all these like sort of layered things that are the antithesis of what you might see initially. And that is very Stephen King,
And
where it's
I
sort
also
of,
really like the element of this town is shrinking and dying, and that's
yeah,
like clearly part of what the story is about. And like all of these issues that you're describing are just kind of like condensed, and the effects of them are felt even more strongly because
right.
there are fewer people to like diffuse them about, right?
Right. And while I did not grow up on an island, though I guess you could just kind of think it was an island of sorts if you think about it just from a small town point of view. As a person who did grow up in a small town, I do think that these kinds of stories and these kinds of characterizations really hit specific notes for me that they may not for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And the Catholicism and that, and this whole, and the Bev Keane character is, I hate to say, I mean, maybe it's not somebody everybody knows, but I feel like that is a character that a lot of people know.
She's
And
horrible. She's just
and
horrible.
not necessarily to the lengths that she goes. I don't mean to be implying that kind of thing, but just the idea that somebody is like so very focused on all the ceremony and all the rules of the church without actually understanding the gist of what the teachings are, right?
Yeah.
And sort of carrying out everything to sort of the letter of the law and observing, and you know, I'm sure we will find out a lot more about her a little bit later, but at least initially, they do a really good job of characterizing her in this specific way. And we don't just see it from how she's acting, we hear it from her, we see it with her interactions with other people, but we also see it in how other people talk about her. And specifically, I'm thinking of the scene between Sheriff and what is his name? The
Bob or Joe? Wait, who?
Joe, yeah,
Joe.
Joe. And that, and we hear other people make comments about her. So it's interesting that they do a very good job at, and she's not the only character that they build in this way, but that's the one that stood out so much to me. And so I thought that this was really well done. It is a slow burn, so they are still setting the table, I would say, though getting there a little bit more quickly in the second episode.
Yeah, it's
But
interesting. It's like a duality between it's a slow burn, but they are not hiding some of these major
right.
plot points. We know there's a monster on the island, and now it's
Yep.
starting to kill people by episode 2. In episode 1, it's satisfied with killing cats.
Yep.
But let's also talk a little bit more about the rest of this cast. You just said star-studded, and I 100% agree. But we've got people like Kate Siegel, who is playing, oh gosh, Erin.
Aaron Green,
Erin
but
Green,
also we have,
she's married to Mike Flanagan.
and she's in almost like everything that he does, as far as I can see. And then we have Rahul Kohli, who I know you don't like iZombie, but I kind of love him in iZombie, and he's fantastic. I'm really psyched to see him in this role. And it's a pretty cool role. Like he's also like he and his son are on the island as some of the only people of color There are people of color, but these two are sort of like new
Well, they're not
members.
Catholic is really the
Right.
main thing that sets them apart. And
They're not, but they're also new to the community. So
this
that's the
this
other part.
community is interesting in that way because they talk about themselves as this like mixing bowl or melting pot, crock pot, because they are like more diverse than your typical small rural town. It's not just all white people. There are people of color. They appear to have at least ethnic diversity, but what they don't have is religious diversity.
Right.
And there's a huge subplot through these two episodes about the Eucharist, or not. I don't know if I'm saying the right words, but the communion, and the anybody who's not taking communion, basically, I think is going to be significant as the story goes on, right?
Right. Well, and that's the thing in a normal church, in a normal sized, but I'll also point out that in most places, church attendance is down.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's not just pandemic related, that was pre-pandemic. But even so, in a larger congregation, most people aren't going to know if you don't go up to take communion. But in this one, you can't hide that. And also, you
Yeah.
can't hide that you're not there if it's like a bigger group of people.
Like the number
Um,
of people who say to Riley after his first Sunday back,
I
like,
noticed you
I
didn't take
noticed you didn't take communion. It's just funny.
But I will also say that that's probably not something anybody would comment on, because typically when somebody doesn't do that, they're not in a state of grace, and you don't, it's a very private thing. Like you don't really question why somebody's not doing that.
That's good
So
insight.
that's kind of odd that they are commenting on it. And for the priest, and this is again something like that shows you something's not, for a priest to be saying this in public at the end where he's like greeting the community in front of parents, that is not normal. So it is a very private thing, because it probably has it, because it has to do with your state of grace and typically your confession, and there that is a very private thing. So
Father Hill is a in-your-face sort of
yeah.
dude, apparently.
Um,
Playing Riley's mother is an actor named Kristen Lehman or Lemon, and I didn't recognize at first because I think she's been aged, and a
oh
few
yeah,
there's several people in this
there's
cast.
another person that is so significantly aged, and I was like,
Yeah.
is that really? And
Well,
I'm
I
sure
think
they'll
we
come up
know
with
what's going to happen is
yes,
there's going to be a lot of reversals of that.
yes, we
But
know.
so Kristen Lehman, I recognize her once I see a real picture of her, because she was
Mm.
in one of my favorite episodes of the X-Files where she played Invisigoth, this like hacker who was getting hunted
Oh,
by an artificial intelligence.
ooh, I
Um,
love that. She was fantastic in that. Great.
yeah,
Yeah. I know who she is now. And then also Annabeth Gish, and there's so many things that Annabeth Gish was in, but
also the X-Files.
yes, also the Exiles, but she's also been quite a few of the Flanagan creations. So she was in Haunted at Hill House as well. But also Say Anything. So there you go.
Say anything.
Oh no, she wasn't in Say Anything. She was
Ione
in
Skye was the
that was
romantic
Ione Sky.
interest.
No, sorry, she was in and West Wing, obviously. Mystic Pizza.
Oh boy.
Um, I know Halt and Catch Fire, though. She did that. And like, I think she was also in Sons of Anarchy. But she's a really incredible actor. So there we have her. Um, I don't know. There's just like this and Henry Thomas, who honestly I did not even recognize at first until I saw the cast list.
What do we know him from?
E.T.
Oh God, yeah. Oh
So
my God, yeah. Now I could see it in his eyes.
but it's just a fantastic cast. I also like the kids that are in this, or the quote unquote kids,
Like
teenagers.
Riley's little brother. This kid,
Yep.
his brother's name is Warren. His little buddy and fellow altar boy. Are they old to be altar boys?
They're old, but if this is a small community, they probably continue to do it because
Like
there's probably nobody else.
there's
It
nobody else.
seems like, and I think that that's kind of like what they're pointing to. They're at a different. So there's like altar boys, but there's like different levels of things and responsibilities as you get older. So they're probably filling in, but there were no younger altar boys here. So I think that's also showing that the community is kind of dying.
There are two other younger kids in the congregation on Ash Wednesday, at least. But yeah,
Right.
and so his name is Uker, Warren's buddy, and they're like troublemaking teens who like to get high, and then Ollie is the other teenage boy who's sheriff's son.
Well, and it's also, I feel like they did a great job, again, very Stephen King like, where the kids have their own sort of world. They're doing their own thing. They're doing their own secret things. And while the adults will come in and try to keep them in line, the kids are going to do what they want. And they're going to like, and even, when there's like sort of the first scene with the three teenagers sitting, around the fire and talking about prior things that they have done, this place where they are, the uplands, is basically that's sort of the place where the kids go because no adults will go there, and it's kind of gross, and there's tons of feral cats and they're not bothered, and so they do a really good job at characterizing that kind of thing, which I think is good. And so I don't know, like I think that I like how the narrative and I like how the storytelling is going. I also got kind of like the thing with the sheriff, I feel like is very Jaws like too, even in how he handles things and the advice he's getting from the mayor to basically because everybody's always worried about an oil spill. Like the mayor is basically telling him, even though you're Muslim, you should come to the church.
You
Just
should come to church and do a reading. I couldn't believe it when he was saying
but
that.
you could see that happening, and it felt like there was a bit of a Sheriff Brody thing going on in how the mayor is trying to advise the sheriff to do things, and the sheriff is doing things exactly as you probably should be doing things, especially in this case, where we see all the cats up on the beach, and he's like, yeah, if there's like some kind of he's like, everybody should be taking care and making sure that this isn't something more toxic or whatever. And then he's like taking care of business, and the mayor's like, this might disturb people. And he's looking at him like he's crazy. The only sort of difference here is that some of the people on the beach support the sheriff. And so they're like, yeah, that's what you need to do. You need to burn these things. So it's like, but I thought that was a nice little touch, a little callback, so that was pretty good.
But he definitely has the like the blather of the practice blather of a politician, even though what's his electorate, what's his constituent number? It's probably like 50 people. But he can just talk and talk, and you even hear him start to repeat the same stories in the same scene. And honestly, that scene where they're having that conversation on the beach, and it's the beginning of episode 2, it's one take, right? Or one shot where the camera is just walking around them as they're having that conversation. That was mesmerizing to me. I'm like, am I going to see the cameraman's shadow? Like I kind of get pulled out of the scene when I'm looking at those shots, but it's also just so much fun to watch those.
No, and I actually rewatched it for the same reason that you're just talking about, because I was like, really well done. That was a great oneer. And same thing. I was like, how did they do this without? Because it's like full light, right?
Yeah.
So, but really, really well done. That particular scene.
So there's some interesting elements here. We've talked about it being a slow burn, and the thing is, we know there's a monster from the very first episode, and you even see it in the first episode.
Very
and
briefly.
yet
Very
briefly, but yeah, and you aren't seeing it in full light still yet, and that's totally great. But what's weird is that it doesn't come out and just start, like, if you were to compare this, if this is a vampire movie show, and I'm not 100% sure that I know what we're dealing with yet, it kind of feels that way, but we'll see. Typical, or depending on what kind of vampire show you're going for, they usually just come out swinging, right? Like in The Strain, yeah, sure, they kind of build up, but you know that they're killing people and turning more people into vampires. In things like, I don't know, 30 Days of Night, they just show up and start murdering an entire town. And in this one, it's so strange because it's like it apparently is flying around and freaking people out by sounding huge and it's kind of noisy, right?
Yep.
And it like keeps getting seen, and it doesn't seem to have a problem with like being obvious.
Well, and who is it being seen by though? And that's the kind of genius part of this, is that like Joe, for example, clearly he has seen whatever this is, but he can be passed off because he's like, a giant albatross was chasing me,
He doesn't even remember it when the sheriff tells him.
Remember it. And
the kids.
Even what the kids see, like it's so quick. I actually had to go back and pause and like try to see what they were seeing, and it was done really well. And I do think again, not to like call out Jaws, but this is a little bit of you're hearing about it. You're hearing about something, although in this case, they don't know exactly what it is, but you're not actually seeing it. And I think that is a really good mechanism because it builds that tension. So even though it's showing itself and not really necessarily worried about being seen. There is some sort of like it has, and it's killing cats versus people at this point. But there does seem to be some thought process maybe behind it. So you're still kind of figuring out what the basic, like what the story about this thing is going to be. So I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, there's definitely something up with the communion wine. I'm pretty sure it's vampire blood, because as
Yeah,
we see through
something.
the in the second episode, everybody's starting to feel better. Clearly in the final scene of the second episode, Lisa can
Yeah.
walk. But like Riley's mom has taken off her glasses. His dad doesn't have his back problems anymore.
Yeah, and
And
he's looking younger too.
yeah,
And everybody kind of is. Although I will also point out that Lisa goes to church a lot more than anybody, so maybe
right.
she's getting more of whatever's
And
happening.
she takes communion every single day. I didn't even know that that was a thing, that you can like go to mass every day, but
You
wild.
can. It's yeah. And I mean, if that church episode for Ash Wednesday was not indicative, I mean, to me it was like, okay, let's see what's going to happen next, because clearly he is implying that something will be.
Oh yeah, we're gonna resurrect this town. There's some. I mean, it's Catholicism. It's full of that kind of reanimated language that we enjoy, because it's, Jesus is the original zombie for some.
Mhm.
But there's a lot of that kind of language getting thrown around, and a lot of fervor.
Yep.
Not the Bev Keane sort of fervor, but something a little more insane.
Yeah.
So Paul Hill is clearly in cahoots, and whether or not he is Senor Pruitt, Sarah certainly seems to think he is, and the way he stares at the doctor is
Really,
just,
it's his daughter.
oh, okay, yeah, because he's really, yeah, him and Sarah
Uh,
Gunning probably had
and,
a,
and her like and the way that he gave the communion to the mom. I
mhm,
think I think the doctor's his daughter.
wild. But yeah, I mean, there's there are a lot of cool elements to this, and I'm really enjoying, and I can see why Kyle was unable to watch it on in more than one sitting. I think he like plowed through the entire show.
Yeah,
um
I had to pause and force myself to pause. So there was that.
yeah, I wanted to
Um,
ask you how you're enjoying the scenes between Aaron and Riley. How do you like the performance of Riley?
I think he's fine. Actually, I started to like him a lot more after the scene with Father Paul. Like I thought
The
that,
AA meeting.
and maybe that's a little bit of what they're trying to do because they're trying to hide a little bit of his thoughts. They're trying to make him somewhat mysterious in terms of what he went through. And so you don't, I mean, you don't, he doesn't actually have a ton of lines up until these points where he talks with Aaron and then he talks with Father Paul. But like we know only about him what we saw in the beginning is that he was drunk and he was responsible for this accident that killed somebody, and that's why he ended up in jail. And this is his whole like this his whole story arc is, coming back to this island. And again, I think that because I grew up in a small town, the conversations between him and Aaron really strike some pretty familiar notes with me, which is, the idea of trying to get away from that community that to something else. And both of them had done that and are now back. And it does feel like they're both a little bit stuck and they have different reasons for feeling the way they are. And she's back pregnant in a community that's kind of gossiping about her. She's back not just like, and her mother clearly is gone. Her mother was like an alcoholic, and she stepped right into her mother's job, and she has to interact with all these people that had different ideas about her mom. And she talks about this pretty openly with Riley. And you get that they were definitely involved, but also they were each other's probably they were the people that they could talk to, the trusted sort of, like if you're talking about confessions, it seems like these two have a level of trust that others in the community don't. Like there's a pretty big bond between them.
Yeah.
And they pick right back up. Like they pick right back up. Like it's sort of like that when you've known somebody that long in your life and they really, there's moments of awkwardness, but then there's like moments of grace between them that are just sort of like clearly there's a connection between them that goes way back.
And through some of those interactions, you also get a better sense of Riley's moral compass. And I think that despite the fact that he got drunk and drove and killed a girl, he seems to be doing the right thing so far. We're not very far into the episode, but he does the right thing almost all the time.
Yeah.
Like he is just this like morose guy who doesn't say a lot unless he's in a really awkward AA meeting with one other person.
Which was amazing. That whole exchange was pretty funny.
But otherwise, he's like he wants to be home to like be home on time. And apparently, that's something that Erin brings up, that he used to sneak out of her room to go home to make curfew. Like that he's respectful. When he sees somebody out on the beach in a storm, he runs outside to see if he can help them. Like he is a guy, is an interesting character for the reasons that you described, because he doesn't say a lot, but his actions seem to speak to a morality.
Well, and because when he did, he was responsible for this person's death, it's not like he can forget it. He sees her every single night, and there you kind of get this whole sense of where he is. He is not something that has gotten, he did his quote unquote time, but he's still in prison because he's still like tortured by this. So it's not as if he treated this whole thing lightly. And even when he's talking to Father Paul, he kind of initially starts talking about the alcoholic piece of him as being another he, and then totally brings out and he's like, he takes full responsibility for his actions, which, this does speak to who he is, but also why he is where he is at the moment. And he's in misery. And even some of the stuff that he talks about with Erin, he most definitely, I will say that I think that they are really putting this island as like a purgatory too. Like, and that's kind of what it feels like for him and for Erin. There's definitely multi-layers of some dogma being thrown in here.
That's an interesting thought. And also in Mike Flanagan's Wikipedia, it says that he's been an atheist since 2018. So I think he's probably working out some stuff on the page here. And what did you think? I love those. I mean, they're a little bit spooky, but I love those shots of what Riley sees when he lies down in bed every night, and the screen turns on its side, and then there's the girl with the police lights reflecting in the glass that's embedded all over her. Yeah, like horrifying imagery, but also just like, wow, I think it's really cool the way that they put that shot together.
Right. And then him in the middle of the water, like alone. And
yeah,
just
what's going on there?
Like without a rudder. Like there's just a lot of religious imagery going on here and references. So I'm sure we'll see a lot more of that, given where this island is and how people are acting and what's going on. There may be more layers than that we will see unveiled a little bit further into this. I also say this as the haunting, at Hill House had a few different things going on and was allegory for some other things. So I think that is definitely the case here. I think I'm pretty certain about that. So we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see
I'm pretty pumped about it. I'm enjoying it a lot, and I can't wait to talk about the next 5 episodes.
We spoke about a little bit about the cinematography and the directing here, and I will say that it is really well done. The art direction in these first 2 episodes, and I'm assuming for the series, there's really like the use of certain, like there's parts that are extremely like desaturated and like just sort of darker and more depressing, and then there's like other, like as I said, they kind of like walk that line because it's really beautiful, but also like this community is sort of going downhill, and you can see it just one of the best scenes I thought in terms of like setting the table about what was going on and what this community is like, is with the scene of the younger brother Warren when he hops on his bike and he's just riding, and you see him ride by and ride into this community, and you see all that the houses that are shut down basically because people have left. It is definitely a community that's in trouble.
I love that scene too, because it was all edited to the music. It was flash to the rhythm, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, so that was really well done. So again, I just think slow burn, but they aren't necessarily keeping like the tension, because you do know something's happening. I kind of like to think about it as like, the Jaws on the island as a vampire, but we'll see if that holds true in the next few episodes. But
hilarious.
it's not, but it's just kind of where my head's at these days. But I'm really enjoying it, and hopefully I will not go through all the episodes, but I can make no guarantee. But I'm terrible with this. I sometimes blend the next one. And so maybe I'll have to limit it to the next two. So we'll see. If any of our listeners have seen this and have thoughts, please feel free to send us an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or you can leave a note on our site, reanimatedpodcast.com, or just tweet at us, which is reanimatedpcast. And I think until next time, ciao, right?
Yeah. Like HA said, thanks for listening and ta-ta.